The science of anxiety and depression. What's really happening during a panic attack? Introduction. When our survival instinct turns against us. Hello, everyone. I understand that for many of you, anxiety and depression are not just clinical terms. They are deeply personal, sometimes agonizing, and often overwhelming experiences. They make us feel as if our own bodies and minds are working against us. The first thing I want you to know is, this is not your fault. Depression and anxiety are genuine health conditions with clear biological roots, stemming from complex systems within the brain. Systems that were originally designed to protect us. In this deep dive, we are going to pull back the curtain and explore what is truly happening inside, from the level of the individual neuron to the emotional circuits. We'll start with the more active and sometimes frightening sibling, anxiety and the panic attack. Part 1. Anxiety, the brain's grand alarm system. Anxiety is an essential part of the human experience. Fundamentally, it's an alert system, an evolutionary mechanism that helped our ancestors survive danger. It helps you focus before a major test or remain cautious on a dark, empty street. But when anxiety becomes pathological, it stops being a protector. It becomes an intruder, triggering the alarm even when no real danger exists. 1. The fear hub, the amygdala. Imagine the amygdala as your brain's fear control center. It's a small, almond-shaped structure deep within the temporal lobe, responsible for processing emotions, especially fear and aggression. It acts as an instant processor. When the amygdala receives information, say you hear a loud, unexpected noise, it almost instantly sends signals to the rest of your body, preparing for a response. Furthermore, it acts as an emotional memory bank. If you had a terrible experience somewhere, the amygdala remembers and can trigger an anxious response every time you encounter a similar situation. 2. The HPA Axis, the stress response. Superhighway anxiety isn't just a thought. It's a full-body, physical reaction coordinated by the HPA axis, hypothalamic-pituitary-adrenal axis. Think of this as the body's internal emergency chain of command. First, the hypothalamus receives the fear signal from the amygdala and releases CRH, or corticotropin-releasing hormone. CRH then prompts the pituitary gland to release ACTH. Finally, ACTH travels to the adrenal glands, which then command the release of the primary stress hormones, cortisol and adrenaline, epinephrine. Cortisol is the primary stress hormone, temporarily increasing blood sugar and slowing down non-essential functions like digestion to prioritize energy. Adrenaline is the powerful hormone behind the classic fight-or-flight response. 3. The fight-or-flight mechanism. This is the peak of the anxious response, and it explains every single awful physical sensation you experience. When adrenaline is pumped into your system, your heart races to push oxygen-rich blood to your large muscle groups, getting ready to fight or run. Your breathing quickens to maximize oxygen intake, which often leads to hyperventilation. You might start sweating or trembling as your body attempts to cool itself down because this reaction generates heat. And finally, blood drains from your digestive system, causing nausea, stomach pain, or the feeling of butterflies. Pathological anxiety occurs when the amygdala is oversensitive or the prefrontal cortex, the rational thinking part of the brain, fails to send effective stop signals. Your body gets stuck in a perpetual state of high alert. Part 2. The panic attack. The ultimate false alarm. A panic attack is an explosive fight-or-flight reaction that fires off when there is no actual threat. It is the perfect example of our survival mechanism malfunctioning. 1. The vicious cycle. A panic attack often starts with a catastrophic misinterpretation of normal bodily signals. It begins with an initial trigger, which could be a normal sensation like a racing heart after exercise, or even a vague, anxious thought. Then you enter a negative feedback loop. Your heart starts beating a bit faster. The sensitive amygdala instantly interprets this as, "Oh my God, I'm having a heart attack." That intense fear triggers a massive dump of adrenaline and cortisol. These hormones speed up your heart and breathing even more. Finally, your mind interprets this escalation as, "I am definitely going to die or lose control." This loop escalates rapidly, leading you to the peak of terror. Your entire body is convinced you are in mortal danger, even though you might just be sitting on the couch. 2. Deconstructing the signature symptoms. Now, let's break down the signature physical symptoms you feel and what your body is actually trying to do. First, the palpitations and pounding heart. This happens because your heart rate maximizes to push blood to those major muscles, essentially screaming, "You need to run right now." Second, you might feel shortness of breath or a sense of smothering. This isn't a lack of air. It's actually hyperventilation. You're trying to over-oxygenate your blood too quickly, which causes an imbalance between oxygen and carbon dioxide, leading to the sensation of not getting enough air. Third, the feeling of dizziness or lightheadedness is simply the sudden change in blood flow and that oxygen imbalance hitting your brain. It's like the brain is short-circuiting due to the rapid-fire reaction. Fourth, many people report tingling or numbness, medically known as paresthesia. This is the constriction of smaller blood vessels in your extremities as your body shunts blood to your core muscles, preparing for potential injury. Finally, some experience derealization or depersonalization. This is often a psychological defense mechanism where the brain hits the emergency off switch to protect itself, causing you to feel detached from reality or yourself because the fear is simply too overwhelming. Understanding these mechanisms is the first step toward regaining control. When you know a panic attack is simply a biological software glitch, a false alarm, you can begin to interrupt that loop. Part 3. Depression. The drained emotional circuit. If anxiety is an alarm system stuck on, depression is a system that has short-circuited or is stuck on off. It's not just sadness, it's a profound shift in how the brain processes motivation, pleasure, and emotion. 1. The shortage of neurotransmitters. This is the core of the biological mechanism in depression. Neurotransmitters are the chemical messengers that allow neurons to communicate. 3 key players are often implicated. First, serotonin, often called the happiness chemical. It regulates mood, sleep, and appetite. Low levels are linked to sadness, anxiety, and insomnia. This is why medications like SSRIs work. They block serotonin from being reabsorbed too quickly, leaving more available in the brain. Second, norepinephrine, linked to alertness, focus, and energy. A dip here can lead to the extreme fatigue and lack of focus, that feeling of no get up and go, typical of depression. Third, dopamine, the brain's reward chemical. It regulates pleasure, motivation, and drive. Low dopamine levels explain anhedonia, which is the complete loss of interest in activities you once loved. 2. Atrophy and loss of synaptic density. Modern brain imaging studies have shown significant physical changes in individuals with chronic depression. One finding is a shrinking hippocampus. The hippocampus, responsible for memory and learning, is highly sensitive to stress. The excess cortisol from prolonged stress can actually be toxic, leading to the atrophy or shrinkage of this vital area. This is a potential reason for memory issues in depressed individuals. We also see a reduced gray matter density. This indicates a reduction in the density of neurons and neural connections, especially in the prefrontal cortex, PFC. 3. The prefrontal cortex, PFC, and decision paralysis. The prefrontal cortex is the brain's executive officer. It manages planning, decision-making, and emotional regulation. In depression, activity in the PFC is often diminished. This explains the overwhelming difficulty with logical thinking, making even simple decisions, and the pervasive feeling of brain fog. When the PFC is weakened, it can't effectively control the overstimulated amygdala, leaving the person vulnerable to negative emotions and automatic, destructive thoughts. 4. Inflammation and depression. The new link. A groundbreaking area of research is the role of inflammation. Depression is now increasingly viewed as a condition strongly linked to inflammatory processes in the body. Inflammatory chemicals called cytokines, released by the immune system, can directly impact the brain, reducing the production of key neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine. This inflammation exacerbates depressive symptoms like fatigue and lack of motivation, creating a tough cycle. Stress causes inflammation. Inflammation worsens depression. Part 4. The connection between anxiety and depression. Anxiety and depression frequently go hand in hand. In fact, about 60% of people with depression also struggle with an anxiety disorder. 1. The role of prolonged cortisol exposure. We talked about the HPA axis and cortisol in anxiety. Over a long period, chronic exposure to high cortisol levels can lead to neural exhaustion. The nervous system becomes worn out from the constant state of alert. Furthermore, it contributes to that hippocampal damage we mentioned, ultimately weakening the brain's ability to regulate mood and memory, which are major preconditions for depression. 2. The draining of resources. Persistent anxiety consumes enormous mental and physical energy. Constantly being in a state of hypervigilance depletes the body's energy reserves and compromises neurotransmitter function. This profound physical and emotional exhaustion is often the bridge that leads directly into a depressive state. In essence, chronic anxiety is a significant risk factor for developing depression. Part 5. The path to recovery and rediscovering inner strength. Understanding. The biology isn't meant to excuse or diminish the experience, but to empower you. When you know that depression and anxiety are conditions with physical roots, you recognize that physical and behavioral interventions can also make a profound difference. 1. Restoring neural connections, neuroplasticity. The best news is that the brain is capable of change and adaptation, a phenomenon called neuroplasticity. The brain can form new connections and even grow new neurons. Exercise is one of the strongest boosters of neuroplasticity. Physical activity promotes the production of BDNF, or brain-derived neurotrophic factor. Think of it as a kind of miracle grow for neurons, helping them grow and connect. Meditation and mindfulness are more than just relaxation techniques. They are proven to increase gray matter density in regions associated with emotional regulation, like the prefrontal cortex. Finally, therapy, especially CBT and DBT, works by retraining the prefrontal cortex to respond more rationally to the amygdala's signals. Essentially, therapy helps you consciously build healthier neural pathways. 2. Intervention and support. If you or a loved one is struggling, Here are some strategies that are proven to positively impact the biological mechanisms we've discussed. Pharmacology, medication. Antidepressants work by optimizing the balance of neurotransmitters like serotonin and norepinephrine, allowing the neural circuits to function more effectively. Therapy, psychological, provides the essential tools to manage the stress response of the HPA Axis and improve emotional regulation skills governed by the PFC. Nutrition, optimizing the gut-brain axis with healthy foods, probiotics, and omega-3 fatty acids can reduce inflammation and directly support serotonin production. Conclusion: you are a marvel of science. As you can see, anxiety, depression, and panic attacks are not signs of weakness or moral failure. They are the result of an incredibly complex biological system that is temporarily overloaded or out of balance. By understanding what your amygdala is mistaking, how your prefrontal cortex is struggling, and how your vital chemical messengers may be depleted, you can change the way you relate to your experience. You are not merely a victim of a malfunctioning brain. You are a resilient, complex organism, and you have an incredible capacity for healing. Please continue to explore, seek professional help, and trust in your own capacity for recovery. Remember, with every small step you take in self-care and mental health treatment, you are actively rebuilding and strengthening the robust, resilient connections within your own brain.